Hello everybody, it's Michael Hollands once again for Sound of the Movies. Today I am joined by Emmy Award winner Jeff Russo for our second interview. This time we will focus on The Umbrella Academy, one of the most recent and very popular Netflix productions. Jeff, I'm glad to have you back.
Oh, hey, how are you doing? Glad to be back.
I'm great. I hope you're good too. I'm glad you could join me today.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you back. And Jeff, like I mentioned in my introduction, you worked on The Umbrella Academy, and this is a Netflix production which has become very successful and also very popular, and it has a very fascinating and also innovative story which is filled with diverse characters. Which character struck you as the most interesting when you first watched the show, when you scored it?
Well, the one that posed the most interesting contextually was Vanya because I got to write, I based basically the entire score on a piece of music I wrote for her right at the very beginning. I wrote this I want to call it violin suite for Vanya to play throughout the season, and then end with this apocalypse symphony, so to speak, the apocalypse suite. And so I would say musically, her character was the thing that appealed to me the most.
The series has been so successful, and reportedly 45 million households have watched the series during the very first month, and season 2 has been announced already. What do you think makes the series so successful and also enjoyable at the same time?
I mean, that's always so hard to pin down. I don't really know the answer to that question. I think that it's a combination of interesting characters, fun storytelling, and fun musical choices, and a really great way to shoot the show, and really good, performances. It's sort of a mix of everything, So it's hard to pin it down to one thing that makes people want to watch it. I think it's basically just a fun show, and you get to sort of just experience that for what it is, and give yourself sort of like a way to disengage from every day and sort of have fun watching a show.
When you started working on the series, did you write themes first, or did you try to figure out the general tone of the series and what would fit best?
All the themes, I wrote the themes first. I wrote Vanya's theme, I wrote the Umbrella Academy theme, I wrote Klaus's theme. I wrote a number of themes to begin with, and then started putting the score together from once the show started getting filmed.
Vanya's theme is probably my favorite theme of the whole series, and it's a lovely violin theme. And how much time actually goes into writing a piece of music like that? How much time did you spend writing it?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I actually wrote that piece of music really before they had shot the first episode, because I was asked to write it for Vanya, so our actor could learn how to play it. So when she was on screen playing it, it would look like she was actually playing it. So I don't know. I think that the violin piece itself probably took me a couple of days to write. I wrote it in the first day, and then sort of went back to it the next day. It takes a little bit, and then as you sort of build a bigger piece of music around that and start expanding that out, that takes a little more time. So in order to build the big theme at the end in episode 10, it sort of took the entire course of the series to get to that point. So it's an interesting question, because it takes a certain amount of time to do one thing, and then as that thing becomes something else, it takes longer.
And Jeff, when a series features so many different characters, I mean, you have the siblings, there's Vanya, Luther, Klaus, Allison, Diego, number 5, and you have the father, and there is the hitman, Hazel and Chacha, and Leonard Peabody, and so many others. how do you, as a composer and a musician, experience all of that, and how do you find the inspiration to underscore a scene or a character?
I mean, it really is about just sort of immersing myself in the source material. I watch and I try to connect with the characters, what they're feeling, what their emotional context is, and that to me is always the most important thing. Trying to score what a character is feeling more importantly than what a character is doing. And I think that's how I get in touch with how I'm feeling about it.
Did the series allow you to improvise a lot, musically speaking?
Improvise is an interesting word or an interesting term to use in a situation like this. A lot of my writing is improvisational, meaning I'm sitting around and I'm trying to think up some sort of melody or some sort of chordal progression or some sort of rhythm, and I just sort of mess around until I hit on something that I like. To me, that's as much improvisational as anything else. There's no putting a band together and having the band improvise. I have to have it all written out for everybody. So in that sense, no. But in the sense of that's part of my writing style, yes.
Where did you actually record the music, or the majority of the music?
Most of the music was recorded at a scoring stage here in Los Angeles, the Warner Brothers scoring stage.
Is there any recording facility which you actually prefer? A facility where you go, that's the one I would like to score in permanently?
Well, I think that every scoring stage has its own sound. I love Warner Brothers. I loved the Bridge, which is no longer with us, and I did a lot of work at the Bridge, and they closed it last August. I had recorded a few episodes of The Umbrella Academy there. But I do love Warner Brothers. I love working at a number of recording studios here in Los Angeles. So, there isn't one place I'd like to do everything. I think I pick and choose the place that I'm going to record based on the sound that I want.
And the series end credits uses an excerpt from the Umbrella Academy suite, which is also featured on the album. And was this specifically written to be the end credit, or is this something you picked on, let's say, when you worked on it? Or did the producers say, well, we can use this as the end credit? How did this come about?
Well, so the suite, the Umbrella Academy suite, was written as a way for me to introduce all of the themes for all of the characters pretty early on. So if you listen carefully throughout the series, you'll hear a lot of the themes in that suite for many different characters all throughout the season. In the end, we utilized bits and pieces of it around the show, but wanted to utilize a bigger portion of it for the end credits because that was a good way to utilize the suite.
When writing music and from a compositional standpoint, what do you think is essential to capture the mood of a series like The Umbrella Academy?
Well, I don't know that there's one specific thing that is necessary. Like, for me as a composer, I just sit and watch and listen listen to myself and try to connect. That's really what it's about. I have to connect with a character in order to write music for it, or else I'm just sort of faking it. And I don't like to do that. So I would say there needs to be some connection between me and the material, me and the character.
Did you have to revise and rewrite some cues constantly, or did you feel that the scoring process went rather smoothly?
Oh, I think that, it went rather smoothly. There were notes from producers and stuff where they wanted little bits and bobs changed here and there. But generally speaking, the scoring process was pretty smooth.
The series also uses lots of songs. You can hear many songs also throughout the action sequences. Did you actually get to decide which songs are to be played, or was this out of your hands because you had to focus entirely on the score?
Well, that was out of my hands and is generally almost never in my hands. That's the purview of our music supervisor Maggie Phillips and our producer Steve Blackman, who between the two of them chose all the songs that were used. My main concern is generally just the underscore and the themes and the main themes.
Do you sometimes like to write a suite which, let's say, incorporates 10, 15, 20 minutes of music for all the different characters, and then you start to dissect it into individual cues? How do you prefer to work?
I mean, I don't have a preferred way of working. I work all different ways. Sometimes I work in suites, and sometimes I work just doing themes. And sometimes I work just scoring to picture. It really all depends on the project. And I've done it all three different ways. So there's no one preferred way.
How would you describe your work process in general? Or would you describe yourself as a person that needs a certain amount of leeway in order to fully immerse yourself into the story? Or do you need to feel some pressure in order to nail a scene or a sequence?
It's another very interesting question. Like, I do find that I work more effectively under time pressure. When there's a significant amount of pressure on me to deliver in a certain amount of time, I tend to be more effective in like how I manage my time. When I have a lot more time, I tend to procrastinate. Which is, sometimes that's creatively good and sometimes it's not so good creatively. So again, there's no real single answer to that question. It really does depend on many different things.
And you have been very busy in general. I mean, you scored the Umbrella Academy. You also continued working on Star Trek Discovery. And Star Trek Discovery Season 2 started airing, I think, in January. And the Umbrella Academy opened up in, I think, February. Did you actually have a scheduling overlap? Did you work back to back on certain episodes?
Yeah, there was a scheduling overlap. I was working on Star Trek at the same time as I was working on the Umbrella Academy for a little bit, and also at the same time working on this movie that is coming out in the fall. So yeah, I mean, I tend to work on more than one project at a time. I find that also helps me stay focused, because when I start feeling a little blocked on something, I can jump onto something else and sort of shake it loose. So yeah, there was some overlap there. Not much though. We finished the Umbrella Academy back in October, and really got moving on Star Trek Discovery in October and November.
As I understand, you will be scoring Lucy in the Sky, which is directed by Noah Hawley, and you had worked with him on Fargo, for instance. Can you tell me a bit already about this project and what you two have discussed?
Well, a lot of it, I mean, I'm pretty much finished writing it, and I'm going to be scoring it in a couple of weeks. There's not much I can say about it other than what is already known. It is a story about an astronaut who returns to Earth and has an existential crisis, and then things start to happen to her, and the entire movie basically tracks her time having this crisis and her unraveling over time. And it's a very interesting, very emotional story, and I think that the score that I've written for it tracks that. It's a very emotional score, and it's a very sort of magical. There has a touch of magical realism in it, and that has lent itself to the emotional context of the score.
If you were to give advice to any up-and-coming composer, who wants to make it in Hollywood, writing for movies or writing for a TV series, what would it be?
That's always a really tough question. People ask that question a lot. I think that keeping your eye on the ball is really important, and meaning not to look sideways at what other people are doing, but just to, do what it is you do. And in that, you end up creating your own voice. And that's the thing that will attract people to what you want, to what you do. I think that if you are someone who writes a certain kind of music, then write the music that you want. Again, I do know that as a composer, you're asked to write music sometimes that you wouldn't write. And that can be interesting, and that could be fun. Like, that's happened with me a bunch of times. Like, I've been asked to try to write a score that wasn't really in my wheelhouse, and that makes you sort of stretch out as an artist. And I think that that's fun. But in terms of trying to make it successfully in Hollywood, there's so much of being in the right place at the right time with the right music and the right people, and there's an amount of luck involved that all I can say is, just hone your craft and hone your art and try to be ready when the opportunity shows itself to you, because that is, I think, what success is. It's, the being prepared for the opportunity when the opportunity presents itself, so you can take advantage of any opportunity that does present itself. I think that many people, hone only one part of their craft, but, a lot of it is personal. A lot of it is not just the music, but about being able to work on a team, being able to, understand and affect notes that people want, being able to understand how to communicate what you think people are trying to tell you, and understanding what people are trying to tell you, and then being able to translate that into a musical context. So there's so many different things. I think that the main thing is, try to be true to yourself as an artist. And that's the thing that will end up keeping you happy.
Do you think that communication, or learning how to communicate with filmmakers and try to understand their language, is just as important as the actual writing process itself?
It may in fact be more important. I think that there are a lot of people who are very, very, very talented writers of music. That is a part of what we do, but it's not necessarily, it's not always the most important part in order to get a job. It's the most important part when you're actually working, but, communication is key, since what we do is a collaborative art form. Making music for film and television, or any visual medium, is a collaborative art form in and of itself. So being able to collaborate and communicate with with the other filmmakers is as important, again, if not more important, than the ability to actually write the music.
Do you wish to perform at concerts, or do you wish to prepare a suite of your music and then take it to the concert stage, or to perform at film music festivals in the future?
I mean, I've done that, and I think that's a lot of fun. I've been a performing artist for my entire career. So yes, I really do enjoy performing. So at some point, yeah, I would say that is something that I do want to do and will hopefully get to take advantage of.
Jeff, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me again. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well.
I did. Thank you very much.